and the introduction of television and mass radio and the media that became dominated in many areas by Christian broadcasters, and the enormous amount of money generated, and eventually the alliance with the Zionist lobby in the United States gave the impetus to the enormous expansion of this formerly fringe ideology.
On February the 7th of this year, over 400 of America's foremost Christian leaders met at Cornerstone Church in San Antonio and unanimously agreed to come to Washington, D.C. for one reason, and one reason alone. And that was to stand up and speak up for the state of Israel.
What an incredible gathering of individuals here. This is fantastic.
I can't resist to say it. I will be silent no more. Our times demand it, our history compels it, our future requires it, and most of all, God is watching.
5,000 years from now, we won't remember much, but we will remember this night, and we'll still be talking about it. We'll be talking about the night that the wild branches that were grafted into the mercies of God stood up.
We today stand for Israel because we stand for democracy.
We will defend ourselves. We will defend our values. We will defend our democracies. And we will defend the Spirit of God, which unites us.
Hagee is the self-appointed leader of an organization called Christians United for Israel, which is the most prominent Christian Zionist organization in the United States. John Hagee and the Christians United for Israel has an enormous amount of political clout, as we so see. Joseph Lieberman likened John Hagee to Moses. At the recent Christians United for Israel, or CUFI conference in Washington, D.C., a panoply of Republican and Democratic politicians praised the work of Hagee and CUFI, and even George Bush presented his approval through a live telecast. This organization has an enormous amount of power.
Christians United for Israel was created, I believe it was in July 2005. It was launched with their first conference in Washington, D.C. But there's a history to it. It goes back to the moral majority in the late 1970s, and several pro-Israel organizations that grew out of that, like Stand for Israel and many others. And Hagee had for many years in his San Antonio megachurch, Cornerstone Baptist, held nights to honor Israel. He's a dispensationalist. He believes all this centrality of Israel kind of theology. He has raised millions of dollars, some of which is diverted to illegal Israeli settlements. So he has, I think, been kind of courted by some of these right-wing pro-Israel Christians and the pro-Israel Jewish lobby, AIPAC, to be the spokesperson and the founder of this new movement, Christians United for Israel.
First, Christian Zionists believe that Christians have a primary obligation above all else to support the policies of the State of Israel, to support its occupation of Palestinian land, to support it as a ethnically pure racist state which discriminates against the large minority of Arab Israeli citizens, much as Mississippi discriminated against black people under Jim Crow. It also supports the expansionist policies of Israel as a military state. and there is virtually nothing that Israel can do that the Christian Zionists are not willing to support. In fact, they are more Zionist than the Zionists. Pat Robertson, probably one of the most prominent televangelists and a Christian Zionist, actually suggested the General and the later Prime Minister Ariel Sharon was stricken with a terminal coma because he defied God by evacuating a number of Jewish settlements from Gaza. So the first element in Christian Zionism, and what gives it the name Christian Zionism, is its unqualified support for Israel,
which they get from the pro-Israel Jewish lobby, AIPAC. So if they want a war in Iran, then they're going to mobilize Christians.
It is time for America to consider a military preemptive strike against Iran to prevent a nuclear holocaust in Israel and a nuclear attack in America.
So, and they're also organizing regionally, and then they have their national convention. So it's a growing and a powerful movement.
Virtually every major televangelist on Trinity Broadcasting Network or other media is a Christian Zionist and buys into this ideology. It is a billion-dollar industry. The total audience, viewer audience, reading audience of media controlled by Christian Zionists is estimated to be larger than the total readership of Time, Newsweek, the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, and the New York Times combined.
The greatest potential of pro-Israel voters will be among fundamentalist Christians. And it's an element in America that's growing. And the Israeli lobby sees that, hey, that represents a larger number. And it's also, a natural base of automatic support for the issues we want.
Now, ironically, despite the large number of people who believe in the rapture, some 39% of Americans, for instance, believe that when the Bible refers to the end of the earth occurring through fire, this means nuclear war. And some 70 million people believe in the rapture. Americans, incidentally, this is almost exclusively an American ideology, 100% made in America. They believe, despite the large number of people who believe this, you will find that very few of the rank-and-file Christians who believe in elements of dispensationalism have even heard of the term, much less understand the underlying philosophy and the methodology behind it. Now, wouldn't one expect that the Zionist movement in the United States would be opposed to Christian Zionism, both because of the fate that it dictates for the Jewish people, but also because of its ideology, which traditionally, going back to Darby, has believed and put forward unequivocally that God created Christians and Jews to take different paths through their history. The Jews were to take an earthly path, and the Christians were to take a heavenly path. And Jews were never to be allowed to go to heaven unless they converted to Christianity. Obviously, the Zionist establishment in the United States is perfectly aware of the anti-Semitic content of Christian Zionist ideology. But going back as far as the late 1970s, when the State of Israel reportedly gave Jerry Falwell his personal Lear jet, the Zionist establishment has realized the value of Christian Zionism despite the essential anti-Semitism of its ideology. To Jewish Zionists, the Christian Zionists are useful idiots. For the end-timer Christian Zionists, the Jews are sacrificial lambs.